Hello, everybody. This is me, Schizo Gamer, talking to you, the voices in my head. Um, I already wrote a journal about my experience as the Mahdi and my enemies that I faced along the way, and I'd like to share that with you today. This will be a pretty long upload, so get ready for a long read. I wrote this journal in a mental hospital in 2022, right at the end of it. I know that the story of the Battle of Armageddon is coming to a close. I now understand that the endings can be in the same place as beginnings, while looking nothing like one another. Where do I begin with this journey? Dear reader, I know that I've asked this question before, and my last answer is still out there in a stolen composition book, as I tirelessly wrote in a place not unlike here in the Haven Hospital. Let me tell you this: it is not new beginnings, nor the beginning of the end. Were these new beginnings, then there would be no need for memories, information, stratagems, nor plans. No, this trip to the mental hospital has left me more sane than ever. As light cascades upon my hospital room, I'm reminded of my struggle, and there are all but a few questions remaining. One thing remains ever clear to me, though. It is I that I am what I am. Puzzling to know that even in the midst of clarity and wisdom, the rules and fundamentals of language can confuse. Even when truth is present, it is difficult not to be confused at complicated truths. Puzzles befuddle and prosperity sings, but prosperity gives way to tyrant kings when it is known what prosperity without principle may entail. The horrors of the Antichrist are plenty, and as I write, I now know this is real. Life's immeasurable calamities all stem from a single thing: the deliberation of evil. As if in wordplay, it is in the name the devil, the deliberation of evil. There are many evils, and they are found in the hearts of mankind. However, the true evils of this world are those that knew better. Before commandment had been made, laws were not upheld, and after a new evil greater than the others had been discovered. For, should one do evil for no other sake than to do the wrong thing, they then follow a philosophy of pain. Evil is at its core selfishness. All natural evil stems from putting oneself above another. In this, some things are benign. The refusal to open the door for another is not evil, but the refusal of a glutton to feed the poor is. In this day's age, our evil is expressed in what we take and refuse to give. Still, the root of all evil is the selfishness of disregarding another's pain. When one fails to care for another's pain, they delve into the selfishness of their heart and then allow themselves to walk into evil. The evil that I have faced, that is now being marched to the restless afterlife, has thus far surpassed the conventional ideas of natural evils. I scratch my face just in the shudderance of the thoughts of the things that this thing has done. But to continue. Many in the past have equated them to a beast, and this is not untrue. Unlike a beast, the false prophet, the Antichrist, Cain, the Kafar, acted upon the most deliberation of evil, and even unto its final days it rolled its eyes at me and declared me crazy in the eyes of mankind. But from whence does this declaration come? From one fact. In my left hand I hold an iron rod, and in my right I hold 7 stars. These stars are the 7 archangels and their new human hosts, their bounty. I knew that the beast and their false prophets simply knew better, as they had been given evidence, signs, and even ancient proof in their lives. Yet still they pursued the devil as a man in the desert rushes to an oasis for water. To this I see only one just punishment: they will not taste of the waters of Sheol, the spirit world, for in this dark and dry desert the only water to be found in the pall and bile of the dead, whose magics may still be used for good. These beasts, however, will never taste the opportunity for heaven, their second chance stricken from the book of life for eternity. Fate is likely and true, but a single fact remains. Whoever is written into my holy son's book of life shall never taste of the second death, and the names of them have faced and overcome an evil variably larger than that of Cain the Kafir. They are those that lived lived through or died during our next two conflicts. The first, the 1,000 years conflict of unification and Christ's reign. The second, the raising of the dragon and the smiting of Gog and Magog, or the Great Tribulation. The worst has passed, but it is yet to be over. Cain the Kafir seems to have lost his power over the women of the world, as of that point in writing, and a great horror therein remains. What Kafir had done to the women of all ages, so too will the dragon do to all of mankind, also all ages. The only way to escape the unholiness of the dragon's supernatural desire is to be within the holy city, for you will be blessed by the Holy Son, Yeshua. The sheer terror of this curse is immeasurable, as a person retains everything that they are beyond control of their desire. Kafir would start by driving women towards him, and then mutate women's minds and bodies based on what he demanded of them. This drove women to insanity, where they'd fetishize blood, viscera, and all manner of despicable things. The only doubt in their mind now is if these lasting changes on their minds, even their souls in many cases, was their desire or Kafir's. I assure you, dear reader, Kafir's impact has been greatly encompassing and nigh absolute. When one's own soul is being used against them, with the key factor being one's sense of love and their desire for it, the world would have ended many times over were it not for the unknowable name of my God and the keys of power he had given me. For it so started with being amidst demons and learning the 7 seals spoken to me by my only created Son, Yeshua. These 7 seals are the 7 governing principles that dictate the invisible on earth. Yeshua spoke the words of power of these seals upon the scroll, and I had recited them to the ancient past. They were the 7 principles of the Kybalion, a transliteration of the seals of the scroll of truth. Now, Brandon Lee Spencer, the figurehead of Brandon B. Herman Spencer, is nearing his end. In all but a couple of hours from now, he will die. He will be captured and thrown into a pit of burning sulfur at the bottom. As I write, he gathers 9 other souls among him to lie with the vain hopes of survival. While his survival is practically impossible, it remains true that he dies soon. I was not certain if he died last night, at the time of this writing. But I was spurred into an insane rage last night from a new person who made me angry for old reasons. The people who knew Brandon Spencer seem to universally defend him and deny his love of betrayal up until he actively betrays them. Seems to universally defend him and deny his love of betrayal up until he actively betrays them. Fuck you. He's so mild-mannered. He is just a human being. He's just acting that way because he's depressed. Even now, Catherine Speck shoves something rough up my ass for my accusation, because she is quite some leagues and degrees of stupid that I could not fathom. My ideations with this woman came from a fleeting glimpse of the future, not in a place, but rather in a feeling. I cannot allow her to defend the beast, as it drives me to fear that KFR may get back up. Were Kafir to get back up, it remains that he would continue to use Catherine as a rape slave, and all the women of the world would be powerless to stop him. It has been 2 days since I had my fight with Catherine, and she says I did not disappear. I did, and in my place was a mimic. To the world, the dispel phrase for the devil's powers is now simply beast. So long I have fought. For 3.5 years, I've led a battle against the 8 leaders of Satan with only a few check-ins able to be had with my security protocols. I'd check in with my friends and make sure that they were okay every time. I wasn't allowed a great deal of freedom these past 3.5 years, but what little I'd spent with cartoon women, or jinn, which were created from the mind. I was with whoever I breathed life into, really. Yes, dear reader, I felt like a whore when I realized it was all real. When it was imaginary and not unseen, I got to see myself for being romantic in ways I didn't think were possible. Now I know that every cartoon woman I was with had become nothing more than mere emotional munitions to be used against me. Emotional ammunition that would always be used against me. Love is the shining stars of shining stars. The bright morning star that grants us life, feeds our crops, and gives light to our laughter and love. Love is the reason why I wake up in the morning, and when I have it within me, the reason why I sleep easily at night. Love is my God, and he declared me to be his. The Holy Son Yeshua has granted me his kingdom, telling me it was in fact I that granted this kingdom to he. Love, the only ultimate good, and where all goodness stems from. One cannot commit to any good act without love in their hearts. Love was found for me in Lord Yeshua, and as he pronounced me his Father, Lord of Lords and King of Kings, I did not understand. Still, I pressed on, not believing that the Antichrist had made its stake in the church and had managed to corrupt it. The prophecy therefore was fulfilled, and the false prophet will lead the whole world astray to worship the beast and the number of its name. We were not supernaturally tricked beyond our past having changed, and verses being rewritten as far back as 1926. 1926 is particularly important because it was the beginning of rapture theology. The last time a King James or King James affiliated Bible was accurate within this means was not often ever. But the most accurate version was from 1826. I've seen every sign, in all their literality and symbolic types and ways. Before these last 3.5 years of blasphemy and argument over the same inane and stupid questions, I was writing sermons and speeches. Of the devil, there were 11 leaders of our modern era, and 10 of the age before any of us were born. I color-coded each. Red was the head called Brandon, the one most well known for his lies, and the one worshipped after it failed in dueling me time and time again, only to attempt to take its own life. I prophesied that it would survive an overdose, and yet it committed the overdose anyway. It lied again, even though I knew it would survive from its tolerance to medicine and drugs, and said that the false prophet had healed it. Orange was Brandon's brother, Stephen. He did very little pragmatically, and did not plan often, but was often the most difficult soldier and tactician to deal with when deployed on the field. All too often did my 200 million need to use the last line of defense, the fatal snakebite, because of him. Because of all his revenge, he was able to overcome so many. But make no mistake, they never took one of mine without us taking one of theirs. Yellow was Ryan, an old friend of mine from freshman year who unmistakably hated and gloated over me back then as well. He was the last of the demon heads to arrive and stake his claim with the devil, and as the prophecy had said, he was only allowed and around to reign for all but a little while. He officiated for the devil, claiming that its rewrites of the scripture were true and invariable, using the shining glow of its deeds thus far as a seal of its legitimacy. He is an ambassador currently, according to his own words. Green was Christian, or Kit, and was the first to use his supernatural powers for rape. In specific, he raped me for having asked so much marijuana from it, and even laughed while it played stupid about the whole of what it had done and was about to do. Blue was Jacob, and he was spent the most time correlating intelligence and corroborating between spies their next actions for the future. One of the more effective heads, with its every successful plan a secret of betrayal and travesty, had been found as the plot that they had designed. From me. Indigo was Joey, who in high school I had nicknamed Johnny on account of Brandon, who had spent most of his time dream traveling to torture people with his favorite weapon, fear. It was the beast's master of magic and only Fae. Of all the heads of the beast, this one had the most skill, but was thwarted all the same. Violet is the one whose haughtiness is the most reviled among me, his name being Garrett. A soldier who always hated America, Garrett had been known to me to prefer to be a gun for hire. This one had more willpower than the rest, but less of intelligence than the least of them. I colored the 3 remaining angelic forms of the beast based on what they had desired, or angelic being more demonic, for they were once previously angelic. For in my extended mercy, I wanted any and all of my enemies to know that I could have valued them as a friend. The last 3 horns were colored indigo, yellow, and orange. The indigo horn was Tyler, who out of all of them was the best at faking being my friend. His smiles and silver linings led me astray, and as our friend Jacob would adulterate with my girlfriend at the time, and he would lie and say nothing was happening behind my back. It was his silver linings that confused the world into thinking that they were unclean and that the beast was holy, the only price necessary for hell. And I remind all of you that these are people who I have known early on in my life, who ended up turning against me as per the prophecy of being chosen at the sea, the boundless sea of time, of all the people who I have met. The yellow horn was Daniel, who goes by Danny, and was the head of all discordiate merriment, and was the one allotted allowances of the crimes based on their service to Brandon. He deserves a hellish punishment for what he had so allowed. All these people had spoken to me inside my mind. All these people had spoken to me as hallucinations and spirits, with their spirits sending themselves out to me as men. As men sending their spirits out to me as men, is what I meant to say. A little bit of redundancy, but you follow. I continue. The orange horn, Nick, or Nicholas, also pretended to care for others. He was mostly kept for logistic and mental support, with a plan B for awakening, should the worst come to worst. And for he had a great propensity for magic. But he was not trusted to hold it because he was considered too righteous at some times, only to be considered loyal to the devil at others. It's the following day, and now I can't help but remember the souls we've lost and the scars we've endured. Among us are the bountiful fallen, and those who wish to stay as spirits to help may do so, but only as I know it. I'll need only the 200 million to sow as many as those who want to stay as ghosts, to defend family and homestead. After the beast is truly dead, then I will accept no more help from the freshly dead. Hence, blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on, for they will have rest. It is amazing that any man may pay the price of even their afterlife, for I know that such a price is too heavy for me to sell in any usual natural money and camera circumstance. You cannot pay your way into heaven. A wonderful woman has become the object of pain at the time of writing. Since then, she has become a harlot, and one who has betrayed me deeply, if I am to believe that the spirit of this woman is the same as the spirit of the woman that I had witnessed. But I continue. A wonderful woman has become the object of pain, and now those that inflicted that pain on her wish to dress her in the scars they inflicted upon her. She became the devil's object of pain simply because I love her and she loves me. They did their best to make this pain unyielding and never-ending. I know that by a year's time, wounds will have healed up and the scars will begin to fade. I can now think of what I want from the future. A poem. I fought so hard, and never took a life. I left it up to heaven when violence frees our strife. I've crafted many weapons and said don't misuse them twice. Now my last question stands. When is magic a vice? I continue into the journal. I've envisioned many different worlds throughout my dreams, and I was told there wasn't a problem that I couldn't fix. Many times I breathed life into an apocalyptic video game where I merely, in the hopes of it, would see the AI get more sophisticated. Occasionally it would work. Did these places have souls? Usually they did, and heroes and righteousness would reign as champion. Even in an open-ended games where you never truly win as the bad guy in these games. Even in horror games this is the case. Yeshua gave me the ability to overcome my obstacles by saying that the afterlife is more important than the living. And now I know my life creates our afterlife. I was now charged forward, indomitable and unstoppable towards this goal. For indeed, I was told that by creating a new afterlife, I would make the first afterlife, the first heaven, more complete and more holy in its creation, and fulfill my duty as the Word of God. It has been another day, and I've had another dream of being attacked by snakes. I was visiting Sora the Troll in Japan, and he had a wife and a child. I went out and did some family-friendly activities together. It started by being bit in the hand by a coral snake in the dream. Sora and I were getting ready to go to the hospital before we showed up at a coral snake sanctuary. A coral snake sanctuary. Try saying that 3 times real fast. Where the snakes ran around freely. While I was there, I saw an amazing sight. The most huge boa constrictor possible, well over 500 feet long, was laying about in the sanctuary. Knowing they had no venom, I regarded them well. Then I noticed it had no eyes and many holes along its lips. I realized something was deeply wrong, and even though Sora regarded the situation as mundane and ordinary, I ran. I eventually collapsed from the venom as I ran from more and more snakes, often juveniles, and met an albino Naga priestess. She told me a riddle just as I passed out, and I awoke at the entrance. Then I had a typical adventure through Japan as a typical foreigner. I felt I was very, very annoying. I ran around drinking from a 2-liter bottle of Coke and laughing in my boisterous cackle. The dream ended when I realized that I couldn't tell if Sora was an actual stage performer or if they were just a prankster. My dreams have always been important to me. I've never really understood their ephemeral nature. Still, I know that there was more than what met the eye there. One of the most poignant adventures I can make is that there is no visual snow inside one of the most poignant observations, not adventures, observations I can make is that there is no visual snow within my dreams. Sometimes I dream of lands of magic. So I wonder if these lands that breathe are truly so different from our own that I can't do the supernatural from their worlds here. Visual snow, to all of you asking, is what you see in the camera right here, that static overlay. But I see it in my vision, in my eyes. It's everywhere. I can't shut it off. I continue. I feel like the conflict in the soul is finally ending. And as I release the final floodgate of polluted water on our lives, I am happy to know that things will never be the same. In this new world without lies, I see a brave new future where even the land underneath us has appeared to change. I've said this phrase so many times, but in all of the instances where I said it did not appear fiction to me then either. So, dear reader, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you what has been happening for 7 years. In 2015, I moved out of my mother's emotionally abusive household and into a house with three friends. Even then, I knew that my friends had drifted from me, but in the promise of a nicer home in a nicer part of town, they had agreed to let me onto the lease. Immediately, I knew that my friends no longer considered me their own, as I discovered only Nicholas Weinrob and his father were on the lease to the house. Because of this, I felt no need to pay rent on time. For a while, life with Nick, Danny, and Kit was normal in that house. They were none the wiser to what I would become, and it would be years before they know what they were. They went to college. I worked at McDonald's. I worked a 39-hour work week, and I was losing close to $100 a month on fast food alone. One day, Danny and I were talking about the supernatural after I had been superstitiously talking about a ghost in the fridge. Now, I remind you all, they were friends at the time, and they had done no sin against me at this point in time. One day, Danny and I were talking about the supernatural after I had superstitiously talked about a ghost in the fridge. He mentioned that he had now been visiting the supernatural board on 4chan, X. I asked him for some literature, and he brought forward the Principia Discordia to me. I read the first mystery philosophy story, which essentially boiled down to, you could pursue wisdom and follow prophecies that you did not expect would happen, but in the end, people will not know who you are, and those that do will not agree on your holiness or wisdom. I saw deep sense in it, and after telling Danny the solution to the mystery, he gained great acclaim among the Discordia cult after plagiarizing the answer. A week had passed, and now I had come to see the metaphor of a water and pool. It had a shallow end to stand and rest, and a deep end by which to dive, even to the depths where you could not see. And the area around the pool, the deep end, sea, and the area is around, and there is an area around the pool. Sorry, there's an area around the pool, and there's a deep end, there's a shallow end, etc. I continue. The deep end is symbolic for danger, and the pool's waters, its arete, magic, or magic, glamour, and other measures of power. The more magic the swim, the more dangerous. Some at the pool rumored that in the unseen depths there were monsters to pull you down and drown you in the waters, but everyone swimming at the time said that they never worried. It was now in 2015 that it dipped my feet in the shallower, 4-foot deep end. I saw a demon sometime in April 2015, as you may know if you've been watching my videos. They were a silhouette of a human in darkness, and when I saw them, I knew they were in my imagination. I'm not in your imagination, Nolan, it said to me. It turned around again, and just the same, my mind's eye saw the being and understood that they were in some kind of consistent imagination. I talked with it, and it said it was the devil. I asked why it looked like my high school friend Brandon, and it said it didn't matter. I asked for its name, and it asked me what it should be. I said Azazel, and it declared it so. Little did I know that this figure actually was Brandon from high school. We continued a back and forth where I would insult it and deny it being real, and it would say it would be real and give me deals. Eventually, it told me that it would leave me alone if I'd sign away my soul, even though such a notion was ridiculous to me back then as well, even though I'd been an atheist for nearly 10 years. For insurance, I asked for something I knew the devil couldn't give. I signed a deal where I go to heaven. It said done, and left. A week went by as normal, and Brandon appeared again. It is time, he said, and before me appeared an average door, normal and outdoorly. It was in my mind's eye, and somehow I understood that with a new imaginary form that remained consistent, I tried the handle. But it was locked. Don't you want to break it down? Brandon asked. Nah, I'm too weak to break down doors. I don't want to set fire to it and destroy what's inside, I answered. So I did what was natural to me, and I rapped upon the door. 3 times. The door clicked ajar, and I saw Brandon leaving, saying, I can't. I insulted him and looked back at the door. I had the feeling that it was left ajar, so as to let me know I have the option to walk away. Without hesitation, I threw open the door, and I became blinded by a white, opalescent light. Or perhaps life. I wrote down life, and I didn't even realize that I meant to write down life instead of light. And all my depression, trauma, and sadness had been answered. As I tended to in such moments, I began to tear up. In fractions at a second, they were gone, and I had a conversation with God. He said, I am God. I am you. It is true. I tried speaking, saying that it didn't make sense, and they told me that I was in heaven, and that the demon didn't send me there, but that it was I that knocked and opened upon the door. They told me that I'd return, but that I wouldn't die. I was filled with so many questions, and they said they would be answered. By the weekend's time, I'd lose my memory of everything said until now, except for the feeling of that light. What I now know is the Holy Spirit. Months would pass. My daily life of working, playing video games, and smoking weed had become as droll and uninteresting as I thought it was. I came to a realization, though. I had seen a real demon and the real God. I had lost my memory, and so began my philosophical questions and answers that would eventually lead me to God. Eventually at work, Nick would ask me hypotheticals and give me a pass or fail to his tests that he gave. He claimed to be God, but I knew better. He'd lead me to believe that I was touching women despite not knowing that it was real telemetrically. I wouldn't come to realize that any of these things weren't hallucinations until 2019, and only now do I know the full story. At some point, Kit took my denial as an excuse to rape me with the same magic Nick was using to have women touched by my body without my volition. I was confused and continued not to believe in it until 2020 or 2021. The signs were what I needed to know. The smell of my poop and the discomfort in my rectum. Nick continued to be the one to pretend to be God and to twist my philosophy that would lead me to him. When he found that he couldn't, Nick, that is, he tormented me until I threatened him, paranoid and ready to defend myself. I would sharpen a katana, or a ninja sword in layman's terms, and decorative spear with a whetstone in preparation for one of my friends, possessed, to attack me. Eventually, the lease was up and I was back in my mom and Matt's house because they were afraid of me. I didn't know it back then, but Matt was a Freemason and likely a vampire. For just under a year, I stayed there, smoking weed and trying to keep it together as I waited for a call back from various workplaces that I applied to. I felt that same rectal discomfort around Matt, but things were okay on the by and large. The beginnings of 2017 and the endings of 2016 came around. I moved in with my sister after my mother kicked me out. I was too troublesome because of the rectal discomfort because of Matt. And I was too troublesome because I was always trying to reveal the truth of Allah and my God to my mother. I used to have a good relationship with my sister until I had to move in with her because there was nowhere else to go. It was then that I realized that some of the signs that I saw were real about a game called World of Darkness. My sister's name dropped Bruja, and how they worked at a local restaurant. It was even a chain. I expected some type of exclusivity for vampires, whether it be an offbeat bar or an exclusive, expensive restaurant. I didn't expect chains to be the norm for smaller vampires' job. Horror followed me everywhere, and it is now that I realize that my sister took advantage of my blindness as well. Since 2015, people were taking advantage of me and were mind-controlling others to do so as well, violating me. I still love her too, which is so difficult because I think that she as an atheist doesn't know what she's doing. So please have mercy on her if you are of the believing audience. In 2016, I had many romantic relationships with cartoons, as God said I could breathe life into anything. Beyond that, I also got to have my first taste of fun and Ghost wrote the Bo Burnham comedy special Make Happy, which was largely a thinly veiled cry for help at the hollow husk-like nature of Hollywood. Otherwise, Mom was still getting high on Oxycontin, and I was still picking up after her messes and pulling her out of diabetic comas. In 2017, everything began changing very quickly. I started to seriously think that my schizophrenia diagnosis wasn't true. Mom had decided to tell me not to come back until I had a home of my own, and I moved to Big Bear with my aunt for a month. I knew that I had nowhere else to go for this, and after a month, I decided to use my last resort. I called Laura, Ryan's mother, asking for a place to stay for a month while I found a job and a home. As long as I was employed, she was willing to co-sign an apartment near the University of New Mexico. I thought maybe my life would have its first taste of stability. Throughout 2016, I had been taking adventures into the ancient Middle East, making Israel. I had never read the Bible before, and God had told me that I had the opportunity to write it myself. Please listen to me, oh dear reader. It is the truth of my experience. That is why I wrote in this book, my journal. Throughout 2016, I had been taking adventures into the ancient Middle East, making Israel. I had never read the Bible before, and God told me that I had the opportunity to write it myself. I didn't believe my mind's eye was real. And outside of scattered memories of Jehovah I heard here and there, my mind's eye was proven correct every time. Sometime between swallowing a guy with a chasm and closing it shut, and all the gory details that I'll know. The blood and the dirt comes to mind. I continue. And mauling future murderers and violent thieves with bears while they were children, The story about the ones who called a man Baldy. They were all going to be thieves and murderers. I continue. I decided I no longer wanted to use the unknowable name's powers to kill. Let me just rewrite that sentence. Sometime between swallowing a guy with a chasm and closing it shut, and all the gory details that I'll know, the blood and the dirt, and mauling future murderers and violent thieves with bears while they were children, I decided I no longer wanted to use the unknowable name's powers to kill. They told me that it was then in their hands on when to kill with a miracle. And they promised me, much at my pleading, mind you, they would only do so if it was necessary to the plan of putting me on the throne of the world and ending the web of lies, enslaving the world at large, and following the prophecy of our Lord in the New Testament, in Revelation, which was confirmed and revealed by our prophet Muhammad. I don't know the word, but I want to say Allah al-Sam. That comes to me from the Spirit. By March of 2017, I was still in Allah al-Sam. Please listen to me. It means in the name of God. By March of 2017, I was still in denial about going back in time and about being God at large. God taunted me into it, but I said that if I was God, I'd show some John that it wasn't even John the Baptist what I was about to do and the various events preceding the moment. It was while living with Laura that I sent the prophecy of Revelation through my son Yeshua to the past about the revelation of the Holy Son's Father and the day of Christ's second coming. It wouldn't be for another year that I'd read Revelation at all. I never ended up getting a job that month, so Laura sent me to a mental hospital for things she didn't see, and I was discharged to a homeless shelter 2 to 3 weeks later. While homeless, I came to find a great many people and revealed an ability to go back in time and change or create the past. 2 people saw me do it with the song The Great Malenko, and I never saw them again. By 3.5 years, I knew that they had surely died, but I didn't have any evidence or proof. I hope that they're still alive today, John and Michael. I remember hearing my enemies' immense levity during their passing, as they declared themselves victor over all others in those 3 days before their resurrection and being carried to heaven in a cloud, something that may have been a false vision from the Antichrist. For years, I had freaked out about the fact that I did not know when the passing of the 2 witnesses had come to pass, even to the point that the 200 million had 2 within that I thought might be within them. That I thought might be them, and them alone. Now things are clear, and the prophecy was made for all time in the clearness of a rainy or snowy sky. Once when the prophecy was made, another when the prophecy was fulfilled. The 6th trumpet blew when the future Dan saw the results of Revelation and knew that he needed me. It began with time travel, and it ended with time travel. It was all so absolutely confusing, and it still is. I wasn't sure when the future was necessary for a star to have a trumpet blown, or if the ephemeral trumpet noises I was hearing was a trumpet or a bowl of revelation. Now I believe the bowls spilled with every ephemeral trumpet, and the last of these, through a glorious song of how my wrath and kingdom had come to earth, was a woe on account of everyone, even myself, not knowing when the wrath would start nor end. With the 7th trumpet. Since 2021, the struggle I felt built to a crescendo where Kafir had then put me into for a lack of any better summative word, a sexual assault dungeon that followed me everywhere I went. The many violations I suffered started when I moved into an apartment at Madeira Court, where I feared that my high school girlfriend was at danger of being raped by a demon. I begged them to attack me and not her, and I got my first inclinations to the evils of Jezebel, who loved to make women and men cheat, blaspheme, and masturbate to Lolita cartoons. To think I once loved her now makes me cement that women will always be my deepest regret. To have fallen in love with a woman with a heart of ice who only ever wanted the deliberation of evil now simply doesn't sit well with me. When I felt that love, it was for her tender and loving side. It was for the way she would comfort and calm me with her icy demeanor. She may have changed. She may have become what she wanted to be. But I now know that she has consistently appeared innocent or excusable because of insanity, and not much else. I tried so hard to cure her insanity and let her know the soul is real, and I feel it's gone nowhere. A song of prophecy came to my mind about the delusions of her. Cheesy Love Song 2014 by Final Last Words. It was the first of some 3 to 4 albums worth of ghost written songs I would write along with nearly a dozen singles, all with my soul, who I would send out and who would be received among songwriters as inspiration. Some of the songs I wrote were wildly popular, with the most popular being a breakup song I wrote while homeless that I sent a year into the past, or some couple months, called Heat Waves by Glass Animals. As it turns out, I sent it into the future. I forgot about that until quite some meditation. The songs I've written during this conflict are easily the things that I take from this, and will actually keep as memories that I value. The discography of Good Kid, a few singles by Lemon Demon, and recently Good Kid has come out with several different songs that weren't ghost written by me for inspiration. A few singles by Lemon Demon, a few pop songs, Kanye West Lift Yourself, the fact I bombed that track ages well with me, and my self-proclaimed debut 0_1 by the Living Tombstone, where I sung background, though unofficially, will always hold a special place in my heart. 2017 to 2020 was dedicated to study. I read the Bible, confirmed what I did in 2016, and began dedicatedly going back in time and talking to YouTubers. I made friends during this time, and it comes at no surprise to me now that many of these friends were the friends I choose to share the burdens that I bear. Burdens of power and leadership, burdens of the pain to be afflicted, and burdens of the prayers I've heard. During these 3 years, I wrote many movies and songs, and learned as much as I could about real life. I started reading the news. I stopped being in denial about what I could confirm with my eyes. I wasn't sure if I was always talking to the YouTubers I liked, but after getting confirmation, I would consider it real in most cases, unless their spoken opinions were vastly different from the mental ones, namely Aaron and Dan from Game Grumps comes to mind. During 2016, songs had spoken to me, and I believed that they had been led by God to speak. Sometimes they were simple love songs framed from the Almighty. Other times they were paying witness to me. In 2021, the singing ended. I should have taken it as a sign, but the singing stopped from within me, and I stopped hearing others singing to me. From 2021 onward, I only heard people disgracing me, accusing me of awful things, and hating every retaliation I did, while taking credit for all the good I did. Again, all with the telepathic voices in my mind. During these 3 years, I began speaking about the foundations of my interpretation of the scripture, and how we've lost sight of the important verses and the forgiveness we need, and about the importance of the supernatural. Ghosts, vampires, and gifts given by God are all foundational to my beliefs, with special importance being put on the struggle between angels and demons. Churches disparaged me in my name until they all saw a supernatural sign forcing them to take a side between liars and myself. I didn't go outside for a long time during the pandemic. The extent that I'd have contact with the outside world was summed up to the therapists and few people from group therapy throughout 2020 to 2022. Every therapist or person sent to talk to me walked away having learned something, and all of them came to believe that I had real things that I had witnessed or should teach. Eventually, I got to everyone that I should have been able to get to. During this time, I came to find out who my real friends were. During this time I got to find out who my real friends were. One after the other, I humbled and uplifted my 7 right-hand men, and made them into the 7 churches and 7 stars on my right hand. Number 1, the first angel to have awakened to who they were was Michael Fischbach, who I have nothing but praise for. Still, I had to think of something imperfect about him lest he find himself better than the other angels, so I told him that the virginity was special, and he threw his first consummate love away. I told him his followers would not have a place with me if he didn't admit to his wrongness, and promised to them all, as well as those who overcame Armageddon and Revelation, the gift of eternal life. Markiplier is the church of Ephesus' star. James Lee was the first of my heavenly stars to preach in the street in my name, even to the point of contention where I said it was acceptable to do so drunk. I showed him the cost and outcome of preaching in my name. He went to jail for a time, cipher, 10 days. And he persevered and overcame the great tribulation he faced when being jailed for street preaching for the one true God. For it, him and all the churches that overcame had been given the right to rule as a crown with the deeds of their life. Knox is the angel of the church of Smyrna. I came to Charles White bearing forth the full extent of my ability to strike with the truth, and held to him the great triumph of holding to his virtue of justice, even during the martyring of Jeremy Stein, who is actually Rusty Cage, who has been replaced and is no longer with us, who bore forth the truth at an Ohio police chief relaxing on crime and reporting that crime was falling, among many other things. The slight against me was simply that some thought that facilitating prison rape was okay and that Muslims don't deserve to practice a religion, and he overcame. Moist Critical is the star of the Church of Pergamum. I came to Felix Schellberg, and I was quite happy to see him doing much more work than the work that I saw him doing before. But my warning that he overcame was that Kayla and her antics were still funny to him, despite her debauchery and hatred for my religion. Still, I held to the previous promises to the other churches, and thus the same to his. The worst among them would have learned paradoxical, dark truths, and I will lay no further burden upon them for their mere tolerance of evil. PewDiePie is the angel of the church of Thyatira. When I came to Sean McLaughlin, I knew that on the outside he was known to be lively and full of energy, but I knew that in private he was in slow and quiet pain, dead inside. So I told him to awaken the soul within and find inner toughness through acceptance, for he would surely die someday. I promised him the same as the others, eternal life through my son Yeshua. Jacksepticeye is the angel of the church of Sardis. Remember what you have received and heard, Jack, if you ever see this video. Aaron and Dan were the interesting examples of angels for me to understand because of their staunch differences yet close relation to each other and how this affected the trumpets. When I came to Dan Avedon, I knew he was afraid of the essence of truth. So I showed him an open door of truth, proved to him I may open the gate, and showed him the false believers who would declare him the true believing Jewish man. He only needed to walk through the door, for I knew he'd fear opening it. He did. And so I know Danny Sexbang, by irony's sake, is the angel of the Church of Philadelphia. When I came to Aaron Hansen, I had to tell him the full ugliness of his overall neutral deeds, which had often been quite gruesome because he had done good only to do bad later on and thus be neutral. For he already knew his righteous ones. I told him to solidify his assets and to purchase books, talismans, and knowledge so he may see the truth behind the lies. He had done so, and thus I can say Ego Raptor is the angel of the Church of Laodicea. Remind yourself of that reminder from the Church of Laodicea, Aaron Hansen. You'll be sure to find good bounty. I continue. I thought the crescendo was over. I thought the rape was ending. But now I know that this is not the case. I'm not sure if or when I'll be free from being violated, but I hope that the day exists. I've made friends, and their angelic avatars pronounce me holy. I fear sometimes that the past and time paradoxes therein will make these things difficult for me. I fear betrayal because of my childhood and how my trust had been misused before. I only ever feel like I could blame myself as well, but my trust comes with an essence of privacy of one's mind and future. Before I got my powers in 2016, maybe 2015, my trust was still constantly being betrayed. I've been violated by all people I've trusted, and whoever didn't violate me abandoned me. My mother belonged to some sort of cult, and she was forced to violate me around the age of 14 when I was of age to have children. With magic, she forced me into a state of intense fear about sleeping in my own bed that night, and used telepathic suggestion to tell me to ask her to sleep in her bed. Back then, I was none the wiser to Naga emotion control, and so I went to ask her if I could sleep in her bed for the sake of fear that I would have a horrible nightmare that night. Even then, I knew it was irrational, and I expected her to deny me for that very reason. I now know that the Skull and Bones Society dictated her actions, and that she probably didn't want to violate me as she did. Skull and Bones. Then she forced my dad away from me on account of their bouts, all for a variety of justified and unjustified reasons. It's hard to demonize my dad now on account of the fact that he was my only parent to outright tell me that the supernatural was real. It revealed to me the truth of what I was born to be, able to be interacting, where all the supernatural things meets, as a were-snake. The traumatized life of a Naga is not a new story. From the sons of Ham, our people come forth, with the curse to always have to see your parents naked at least once, whether or not you want to. Though protected from genocide by Yava, the only Orla, culture permitting, the one who saved Noah from the flood, I came to find that my heritage as Naga was the source of two symbols, the snake of Moses' staff and the staff of Asclepius. Beyond that, across the world, snakes had been a symbol of trickery when associated with evil, and wisdom when found with good. Even the Aboriginals had visions and witnesses to one of my forms, a snake with an array of different colors that glistened and glimmered like a rainbow. Towards the end, I came to Mayans as Quetzalcoatl, the destroyer with the aspect of the sun. Many times out of Israel I had sent my mind backwards in time, and many times I would appear to people in visions. Most often I appear as a spirit dragon in the ancient East. In this I know that the believing pagans throughout the world once knew of me, and thus I have touched the entirety of the world. I had come to find the answers I sought by the believer pagans, as many of them found it to be their sacred duty to fight against the devil and his children. In this obligation they created Templar and Night House orders dedicated to fighting witchcraft, vampires, and the ancient immortals of the Pharaoh, and all the ghosts working underneath them. And this is only in the West. In the East they did the same, but with different orders. In the modern day, the supernatural was easy to cover up if you weren't a pharaoh or were person. Or if you were, you'd only have a few abilities in which to hide. It was this way by design, of course. Since movies and TV, the supernatural has been pertinent on the minds of the world, and as our folklore had been important once, we so wished it to be so again. I saw many truths of the supernatural in media, but the lies were far more popular. Lies like the joy of being a vampire, their secret perfect and loving nature, and their exceptionally brutal enemies, the werewolves. The cruel irony of propaganda, all for this moment, this day and age. Yet still there is an important impart of truth. The music preceding these moments and coming months held to the secrets of their lives, and they still hold to them. The evils attempted to hide, but their melodies and attempts to seem genuine fall on deaf ears, and the evil is easy for me to spot in the emotions of their music. Music has an expression behind every chord. A song without an expression, or an expression that can't be known, is hollow and an unloving song. However, when a melody is played or sung in earnest, I know the soul behind it. Some pop songs are clinical, built specifically to be catchy and fun to listen to. Some pop songs express what others had thought and felt, and some pop songs express the same thing that every song and melody like it expresses. The hollow songs are easy to spot for the soulful listener, and the soulful songs are easy to spot even for the soulful listener, or even for the unsoulful listener. Even hollow listeners may know when a soul has true heartfelt expression behind it. Still, it remains ever clear that songs express from what is within the heart. Mages had made many songs from the heart, and from a heart of magic it spurs a great multitude of things. I've heard songs witnessing me from the days onward. I've heard songs talking about me, who I was, all-time what, and unpronounceable by They Might Be Giants come to mind. I've heard songs of prophecy, Pompeii by Bastille. I've heard even my own ghost-written songs. Still, no expression of the heart that is genuine remains a mystery to me. In this, I found my starts into the reality of the supernatural when I go back in time to meet the supernatural. The ilk of Hollywood was often supernatural, and it came as quite a surprise that many of them were satanic. The satanic panic affected Hollywood vastly, and was one of the first starts into the horror of the Antichrist church of ignorance. Magi had become evil, therefore also seraphim. Were people had become evil, therefore also cherubim. Speaking to spirits had become evil, therefore also had Shaman and Solomon alike become evil. Hollywood and its writers then, for decades, removed the reality of demons and angels from their art and instead replaced it with the glorification and sympathization of demons and supernatural evils. Hollywood became a vestige of lies, and its artists its liars. The supernatural evils of the earth had laden their art with supernatural charms, a sin most foul. With neither thought nor purpose, these charms beguiled people into feeling awe, laughter, and tears. With it, the propaganda machine had been set. This propaganda became the foundation of my denial. For my entire life, I denied my supernatural experiences. It was always the same conversation. I saw something invisible. What did you see? Something. Invisible things aren't real. You're imagining things. Yet I had actually seen ghosts, haunted dolls, and invisible powers used right before my eyes. Even though my parents knew and understood, they were unable to talk to me about the supernatural due to the nature of secret societies. Secrecy had been the means to fight the supernatural war, and it had been this way for as long as anyone can remember. Invariably so, the retention of secrets would have won the war, if not for me. Both church and government had been taken over on account of the secret societies of this world. Magic and real supernatural abilities were taught, bought, and sold on the docket of and to collectors from secret societies. My life, due to all of this, was destined to be shewn and littered with delusion and surrounding the spirit and true nature of this world. Littered with delusion surrounding the spirit and the true nature of this world. Because of that, I lived a life in sadness and execration, or languishing. To have such ability and destiny in a world where both were for the rich and rich alone was to live a life of delusion and lies. Even from a very young age, I was able to conjugate a sentence, and from the ages of 4 onward, I spoke words and knew the meaning of them without having ever learned them. I even spoke entire speeches from Calvin and Hobbes without knowing about it. My sister even told me about a door with a functioning lock that I could always get through despite its baby-proofing. She even told me that the police found me near a church with my mother's fake tooth and a couch cushion. Still, it wasn't until I was 27 I believed all the experiences of the past were real. I was able to walk through that door. It turned into quantized matter as I just walked through it. Dreams, prophecies, and uncanny fantasies all proved themselves to be true, and for 26 years of my life I denied them. My parents' double lives as vigilantes against the supernatural, my destiny to break the veil of lies and dethrone the Pharaoh's capstone, all of it I denied. My enemies gathered, rejoiced, and partook in debaucherous deeds because my family and I could simply do no better with the hand we were dealt. Being born under 2 snake cults, the Bee and the Skull and Bones, my parents were both a part of assassin orders that they, under the volition of their leaders, I was not allowed to know about. Beyond that, I was kept blind to dangers and joys about the supernatural alike. My childhood was bleak, and the supernatural has made it muddy. Years 1 through 3 are mostly a mystery to me, but my 4th birthday I lived in a nice, comfortable 2-story condo in Santa Rosa, California. Besides my spirit quest with my mother's tooth, this part of my childhood was good. My father, the great eagle, whose totem spirit was eagle, kept me and my grandparents safe, with my mother safe on 10 acres of land. I've yet to receive confirmation at the time of this writing. But I suspect our wilderness keep was besieged by a child-turned-vampire that led in a demon that corrupted my father. Perhaps even 100 demons. ending the 42 months of safety as prophesied in the Bible. I imagine the one who brought them was my sister, on accident, not knowing or fearing the truth of Allah. After that, I lived a life within the veil of lies, called a masquerade, and dealt with it as any other would, by saying that the supernatural wasn't real. My dad once told me the worst a ghost can do is scare you. Other memories, such as my mother saying, "If it's true, then I'm sure you'll prove it," floats into my mind as well. All the while, I had to deal with emotional abuse of my parents as well. My mother was prone to violent outbursts of anger, which would result in smashed dishes, slammed doors, and my sisters and I's tears. My dad wasn't great either. Anything seemed to set her off, from the back of the sink not being clean to a sink full of dishes or laundry not being done. When I was in middle school, she picked up a heroin habit and asked me to pee into a Tupperware container to retain her nursing job while shooting up behind her knee. My father, or my dad as I prefer to write now, was an alcoholic as well, who would often blame the lack of house maintenance on me, my sisters, and my mother despite not having a job himself. He was a key factor in her heroin and later Oxycontin addiction, and shot up with her while buying the drugs himself, though he is now indeed made pure because he has since done great bounds in order to be forgiven. But I continue. My parents, supernaturally, were war heroes in the fight of darkness and light, and they themselves had great flaws. I still honor the full of what they had done, even though it's difficult to believe that I find anything to honor about them at all. Still, Mom and Dad's robes are laden in the blood of evil, just as are mine. The reveal of their double lives relieves me of the pain of that question that showed itself all so often. Why are they like this? Why do they show their love like this? And I hope other people who are sons and daughters of veterans understand that as well. I didn't until my mother passed. I hope you learn faster. I continue. I often wonder how often my father had thought about what I had been, the one. He looked at me in a way that I now know is a suspicion that my destiny was to send Cain, the master vampire, to hell. He knew many Naga and Guru prophecy, and may not have known that along his life's way he had become an avatar of evil. I forgive him for every angry word and insult he'd given me, and even without knowing this, I desired his love. He was the first who told me about magic, and also the first to tell me to stay away from it. My mother was always cryptic, and often denied the truth with an anger that could only evoke a sense that she knew more than she let on. My earliest example was when I was 4, and my dad bought haunted antique dolls for my sister on account of her making fun of me for believing in ghosts. She laughed it all, but truthfully, the dolls would move on their own accord, even teleporting down the hall and blinking on their own, because they had opposable eyelids. I had nightmares about that doll. It would torment me even until I had been in 5th grade. It would enter into my dreams and say it would kill me and my family in gruesome ways, and I was too weak to fight it. Instead, I tried to reason with it in its cold, dead, glassy eyes. I eventually overcame it when I'd taken control of my dreams by making the nightmares ridiculous and stupid. It took practice, but it made me overcome my fears to know that they were stupid things to be afraid of. At age 5, I was more or less happy. I had friends, Rourke and Sam being the most memorable. They both liked me, but Rourke stopped being my friend as we drifted apart over little kid fights and little things. All the same, I wish him well. Sam was also a good friend to me before, and I moved to Carthage, Missouri. Carthage was not a good place for me. With my mother in an interracial relationship with my father, or again, as my dad, and my dad in an interracial relationship with my dad, she faced a ton of adversity from humans and supernaturals alike. She was called an N-word lover many times, and I was hated in school for my mixed race. The antique 90-plus-year-old house I lived in was haunted, and after finding a soot-covered lamb in the hole of a chimney stack of an old, unused fireplace, I had a day of strange illness. I woke up with a single thought: this is evil. as I projectile vomited on my bed and two of my walls. It was then that I was developing amnesia during supernatural events, and I can now recollect them. During that night, I had a nightmare of a little girl being ritualistically sacrificed for Satan in my room, as 6 cultists chanted for the death of the Father and Son and the subjugation of my spirit. I left Missouri with 2 good memories, however. My 2 kittens, Comet and Cupid. I miss them. They're gone now. I continue. I then had to move in with my aunt, Lori, because Mom had cut it off completely with my dad as he left for New Mexico. I didn't have any friends, and I was unhappy that I had to move around so much. Something in me changed in Missouri, and I gave up on having friends entirely. My mother moved in with my stepfather, and to trap him for her financial security, she took a trip to Lake Tahoe to do a casino wedding, while my sister took care of me for a week. It is now that my memory became fleeting. 3 years of my life disappeared nearly entirely. I didn't remember daily life. I still don't. I had to supernaturally recount events to know what happened. All I used to remember was I met Katie at the age of 8 in the 3rd grade, and had a moment of childhood romance where she asked me to marry her. Like an idiot, I refused because of a crush I had on a girl who didn't like me named Maria. Her friends ended up lying to her, and she stopped hanging out on the playground. I never saw her again. I remember that I had horrible outbursts of anger and violence back when I was 9, and I now know why I had amnesia for 3 years. After my sister turned 18, she left for college and to live with her Bay Area boyfriend, Alex. Mom had a 3-hour commute, and unbeknownst to her at the time, my stepfather had an addiction to child porn. He raped me at the age of 9, and I had not known it, but he was a Freemason family member, and a Freemason himself. With powers granted by Freemason ritual, he erased all memory that would link my logical memory to understand what had happened, erasing 3 years of my life. I went back in time to tell him that he wouldn't get away with it if he did it again, ensuring that my acting out would stay the result of neuroplastic trauma. For good measure, he had a vampire compel me to not stating that I had been raped, something that I have since overcome. My mother eventually went searching through his internet history, as debt collectors had been calling her. She blamed my father, my dad, who had been a supernatural link to me for my outbursts. She discovered child pornography websites in my stepfather's den's personal computer. When she confronted him, he sent a single message back saying, "I know how to use my shotgun." She asked me if he raped me after showing me the text. I didn't know the sensation or why the glimmer of tears were in my eyes, but I told her no, due to the vampire mental domination. Because of this false statement, I would return to Matt, my stepfather's house, on an additional 2 times after moving to New Mexico to live. My mother did not take it so kindly either. She was not cold. She was of the utmost concern for my safety. She was none the wiser. Elementary in New Mexico was okay. But between the tortured and haunted soul I had, making friends was difficult. I eventually found my niche for a little while. But my adult and obscene nature, coupled with an angry and insulting tongue, did not make many friends. Eventually, I found that I really only needed one friend at a time, so I tried to stick to that by middle school. Middle school did never seem to be good for anyone. It seems like if you liked middle school, you wouldn't like high school, or at least that was true of myself. I actually did have one great friend, Anthony Lerma, and he remains a friend to this day, sort of. I moved back into Matt's house during middle school, and heard back from Katie after hearing that I was now standing up to bullies. Due to the amnesia, I couldn't talk to her, as it was her friend that asked if I remembered a girl named Catherine. I told her I remembered a Katie, and I now know the Indigo Demon had forced my mind to forget her name, and only remember the short-lived nickname that I gave her. I moved away again, and my mother blamed Matt's lies about debt. I then had a short time in middle school again, resulting in me being beaten up for saying the N-word to a kid, burning the back of my neck with a magnifying glass. My mother feared for my life because of McKinley's bad gang problem. I was put into homeschool for the rest of middle school. 8th grade was spent online. I found the joy of chat rooms and forums. I had a girlfriend, Audrey, who was 18, and I had fun talking to 2 Armor Games users, Sanier and Strop. They were my best friends and very compassionate and kind toward my dad's raging outbursts and constant fighting. Many days were spent wishing, even praying, for the love I wished I could have had for my family and I felt that I had lost. Sanier, Strop, and Audrey had become that family. Because Mom had taken night shifts working for the hospital ER and no one else was at the house more often than not. They were dear to me, and I regret chasing them both away with my tortured and slightly deranged personality. I lied to Strop after he showed me 2 teenagers, 1 hammer, asserting I was a deranged psycho undeserving of love. I also chased away Sanier, saying to them, though I later discovered they were a her, that online friendships were nothing more than words on a screen due to a pressure granted to me by my mother. Audrey left me after a fight, believing my newfound confidence was due to cheating and not our budding relationship, as I was depressed when we first met. Zofia, a friend of mine from Armor Games, stuck to me as a friend before I left the forums for feeling unloved. It wasn't her fault. Sanier and Strop would respond to me when I reached out, but still took me off their contacts. I asked my mother to let me go to high school in person, and she allowed it as long as I could go to school across the town at Paseo del Norte, in the nicer part of town. It was within walking distance, and due to stupid school board members making dumb school boarders, my dad was able to convince them to allow me to transfer there. It was freshman year at La Cueva that I had found the first of my friends to betray me, yet the last to join the beast of the sea, the beast that I had mentioned earlier, of those 7 names, who I will simply refer to as the beast from now on. Perhaps it was that he instilled trust in me over the accusation about his sister that he overcame. Maybe it's the degrees of help his mother gave me under his volition. I'm certain that he decided to go against me and join the beast over my ultimatum about the accusation over his other sister, who he no longer lived with. The accusation was the molestation of her. He seemed to have done much to earn my forgiveness, but was unwilling to go to prison for 25 years. He lost his vanity, his personal freedoms in regards to my help, though not at my volition, and his personal interests, though not at my suggestion. Though he'd changed so much about himself, he'd refused to accept the justice of the truth. Before he'd become one with the beast, as the head of ignorance and the corruption of religion, especially in regard to how it governs in America, he was actually a good and compassionate friend, though cold and uncaring in nature and demeanor. Because of this, we had many nice days and conversations during high school, some of which will go untouched by the time travel and Mandela effect. The Mandela effect, of course, is when the past changes in the present because of someone interacting with the past through time travel. Though this is a less well-known effect to the Mandela effect, where simply the past has changed, and many people do not correlate it in their memories correctly. Because 2 pasts were learned among 2 different people. I continue. It was during this year that I went to a church for the first time in years. Mom was raised Catholic, and after I was 10 or so, she told me it was then my decision on whether or not to go to the Baptist and Protestant churches we would usually go to at the time. Because I knew prosperity and damnation to the unpure gospels were full of it, I decided otherwise and became an atheist. The irony of this age of apostasy and how it affected me, even as shoes ever forth from my sacred heart. If only I had met a preacher that cared about 1 John 5:16 and Revelation 21:7. I would surely have been a believer long before I had the opportunity to go back in time and talk to prophets myself. Perhaps it was fate, perhaps something else, but the reign of the Antichrist and his ilk that had stalked me since I was 42 months old began long, long ago. I truly had no opportunity to believe as long as ignorance and the purity of prosperity gospel reigned over the church. I could cry, if only. What use would there be? Still, I didn't convert for a girlfriend and my future spiritual well-being. As a friend I went there with every Wednesday, I looked at me with such deep disappointedness that I feared she'd never love me, and I could not quiet my heart that ached for more. It was all because I forgot the day of the week and hung out with Ryan, the last set to join the beast, who torments me to this day. Sophomore year, I moved into Matt's house for the last time in my adolescence. It was the last year of 2012, and it was towards the end of the Mayan calendar that the imperceptible darkness was released into all time, as I had decided to love Brandon Spencer and Kayla Murphy, who, to the modern Sidon, or believing pagans, in the Quran's words, and that isn't so-called believing pagans, just by quotes, believing pagans, by the Quran's words, would later know us as the Triot. I was a figure of creation, she was a figure of retainment, and Brandon was a figure of discardment. And it was all a lie that they built. I, a disguised spirit as a female, played the role of the earth, or Gaia. Kayla played the role of the weaver. Brandon played the role of the worm. My personage became the god to a supernatural race of people called Farah, as well as the weaver, who sowed a lie that she, the worm, and I had a previously balanced and natural relationship with the natural world as creator, retainer, and destroyer. The damage done by this is insurmountably large throughout the years. The Farah didn't know who to trust, and Brandon, i.e. the worm, still killed voraciously as Farah aspect of the devil. It was during this year that I met many other friends whom I decided to give opportunities to go through time with as well. Garrett, Kit, Jake, Tyler, Joey, Daniel, Nick, and Stephen. When I met Garrett, he prided himself on being a violent psychopath. He would often jeer at his violent tendencies, and I only knew him for a couple of weeks. His angst and how it could be legally condoned through the military was all that I knew him for, and after he came back from boot camp, it was all that was cemented. Jake was a pathological liar, and found great joy when others would believe his lies, and greater joy simply by the act of his lying. He prided on himself for lying to women for sex, and even used his lies to have sex with Kayla. He did so, of course, so that I would stop my own angst caused by the formation of the triad and the soul tie bound to her desired feelings to be made in myself. Not that that was his intent. Tyler had been a liar as well, serving to be the one who felt the way his lies were delivered. He would use the principle of polarity to send good energy to people in the midst of lies, and false hope to drive to people the idea that the beast was holy. His sins of debauchery, too, are piled up to heaven, though he has no say in the beast's plots. I have since been proven wrong. Joey's role in the beast was to be their master of magic, performing miraculous deeds in this world and others. He would lead the people of this world to worship Brandon B. Herman Spencer, which adds up to 666, and would torture and murder people in the other worlds until he crafted, which is to say, crafted of Jinn's spirit, of them, lived in one of his controlled nightmares. These poor people lived in pain and avarice until liberated, but me and the angels encountered them on all fronts. Daniel was where it started for me, and he became a great adversary. Though, like Tyler, he had no whims for the beast's plans due to a lost supernatural bet, he was utilized and trained to be more dangerous than the rest. His specialization in mind control techniques framed a friend, an angel named Tyler Scheid, for rape towards me, and had been used for countless more supernatural debaucherous acts. The vileness he spread served as the satanic inspiration for the Discordia cults, and he acted as a priest for their insane temples. Nick and Stephen, both color-coded orange, were both of the laziest of the beast. Nick spent most of his time making blasphemies and means to declare himself God and decry I, the vessel, as nothing more than a witch. Stephen had more talent than any of the heads of the beast, but rarely did more than duels and one-on-one combat. His spirit would have been more terrifying to behold if not for the fact that its primary motivating force was revenge. It wasn't even until Brandon supernaturally faked suicide that he even decided to enter into the fight as the head of the beast. All of these people were once my friend. All these people I once cared for and wanted to keep close for my adult life. If only they had not gone astray. With each of them I asked the question, if you had the power to do either, would you save the world or destroy it? Brandon said he'd outright destroy it. I didn't believe him. I insulted him to help me rewrite the scripture as God told me I'd have the ability to do so. He ended up writing to not wear clothes with 2 threads, to stone homosexuals and to stone adulterers. After so many clear intents to tear down what I wanted, it was clear what he wanted. For Stephen, he merely stated he'd loyally stand beside his brother, though he remained ambivalent about evil until he suspected he'd not be betrayed by Brandon. Ryan would have saved the world if he could have had the rape kept a secret. However, when he realized that this was impossible, he decided to destroy the world simply for the maintenance of his web of lies. Otherwise, he would have been little more than a puppet, doing righteous deeds only when ordered and commanded closely. He would have gladly taken work, but wouldn't have upheld more than the bare minimum. Kit was undecided, but only in the name of hesitation. Having idolized evil through his music and drugs, he saw no worth in living a holy world. Rather, when promised sexual slaves of men and women alike, as well as a taste of all luxury, he decided he'd enslave the world or destroy it. He discarded all light from him very quickly, taking haste to capture the world for the whims of the beast. Joey, too, said he'd destroy the world outright. I knew him the least out of the heads of the beast, as I knew a lot about Garrett secondhand, but the small interactions I had with him reeked of pride and the desire to spread fear. When I offered supernatural power, he assured me it would not be put to good use. Deciding not to make the same mistake twice, I left him with a different mistake. I told him World of Darkness was soft disclosure for real life, and that all the stories and names were real, and that no matter what, the world would never end. Garrett said that he'd want to save the world, having held many of the political motivations that I did. Even though many heads and horns had awoken to their souls' nature, I decided to leave him and let them tempt him first. He was titillated quickly, and fell to the promises of evil over a few short days, with the key factor being that he believed as long as I was the one leading the opposition, then surely he'd prevail. The horns of the beast, or the 3 prophecy kings who'd yet to receive a kingdom, quickly lost bets made official through the dragon, i.e. the spiritual Satan, that discarded their free will. Some of them were hurt for speaking nicely of me, but all of them fell in tow quickly to the whims of the beast, unwilling to break their supernatural promises to the devil and face the consequences of breaking their promise. After meeting the beast out of the sea, I left home only to return to it, thus beginning a new chronicle in my journey, the story of the clown, the jester, the dead royale, and the minstrel. This legend ended up being reciprocated to Jake, and they had little appreciation for the legend I had become, beyond the networking opportunity therein. Speaking with artists can be fun, producers prosperous. However, it began with the comedians. I talked with my favorite, Bo Burnham, and he agreed to let me use my spiritual powers to ghostwrite the Netflix special Make Happy. He was an unbeliever in me and powers in general, so to make him wake up, I laid a simple curse on him for several years. When he'd been on stage, you know what people would think of him. When he denied that I co-authored Make Happy, I didn't anticipate it, but the curse gave him panic attacks, something I know he is resentful for today, though I wish we could be friends. After my debut with Make Happy, I felt that maybe I could make my own music. The Spirit devised a miracle of inspiration for me, and I began to sing improvised songs over instrumental beats I would listen to. Tears after a performance to Loud Pipes or Rat-a-tat, I told my God that if I had assurance from an artist that my songs were good, then I'd write. Dan Avidan then Mandela affected the song that I performed out to the internet, reassuring me that I had talent. I wondered what I'd write about. The song is, of course, Loud Pipes. featuring Dan Avidan. I wondered what I'd write about. I used to hate love songs, but the spirit spurred me into the inspiration yet again to write Cheesy Love Song 2014 by Final Last Words over a foreseen future that, at many points, I simply couldn't believe. After this, I began realizing that I didn't need to write for a specific band to get my messages out there. When I'd have a song I needed myself to hear, I'd make sure to get it in my YouTube algorithm somehow, even making YouTube a new type of YouTube account called Topic. In total, I've written about 40 to 50 songs. Since 2016, currently 2023, each ghostwritten for a plethora of artists I enjoy. I first started by sending off my music to anyone who would perform. I started waiting for a few big bands and focused on the indie scene, on my performers. This is my story thus far. This is my biography. I've lived through a lot, and there's a lot that I haven't said, but this is the overview of everything that I am going to talk to you all about. I am the Mahdi. I have been afflicted by Satan. Satan has chosen the people from my past to afflict me, and so be it. I will be an affliction to them, and they will not even see me coming. Thank you. This has been Schizo Gamer. Talking to you. The voices in his head. Alhamdulillah. May we all walk in the light. Oh, I remember. It's okay to be gay. Strange as that may be for those who believe in Allah. An abomination is a taboo, not a sin. I'll bring more videos in the future denoting that.